morning, Year 6, and this is our third writing lesson of this week, where we're writing a non-chronological report all about that Day of the Dead festival in Mexico. Our learning objective today is to plan a non-chronological report. So we will be going through the ways to plan, and by the end of this lesson you will have a plan for your writing. You do need to make sure that you have your research in front of you from yesterday's lesson, as this will help you to plan your writing for the week ahead. So to recap on yesterday's grammar, we're going to be focusing on adding relative clauses to writing once again, as that's going to be really important as part of your plan. So you need to always be thinking about, how could I add some extra information here? I could use a relative clause. So I'd write down my idea and then I'd note next to it the relative clause, but we'll come on to that in a moment. So just looking at this little paragraph here, what I want you to do is I want you to have a little look and see if we could vary either the punctuation and add a relative clause as well. So I'll read the paragraph to you, and then on the next slide there is an example of a sentence that you could improve, but before you look at it I want you to have a go at doing it yourself and adding a relative clause. So the first sentence reads, "The Day of the Dead Festival is a celebration of life and is filled with vibrant colours." The next sentence, "During the event, people decorate their homes, streets and gravestones with elaborate skulls." So there you've got information all about the Day of the Dead, and it's kind of a generic overview. So this would be like the introduction to your writing. So it tells you what the festival actually is. So I want you to pick a part of this where you could add either a different piece of punctuation, or you develop a relative clause which includes brackets, dashes, or a comma. So think back to yesterday's learning. Your relative clause starts with which, who, or that. So those are the three words, one of those that I'm looking for, and you are going to either use brackets, dashes, or commas to add some extra information into this sentence. No other part of the sentence needs to change, you are just adding something into it. So here you can see that I've taken the first sentence and I've added my relative clause to it. So my first sentence now reads, "The Day of the Dead Festival, which is a celebration of life, is filled with vibrant colours." So rather than changing really anything about the sentence, all I've done is added in brackets and the relative pronoun which, and I've included "is a celebration of life" in brackets. All that does is show that I can vary my sentence structure and I understand how to include extra information. The next few slides, you're going to be having a go at identifying where the relative clause is, just to get more ideas in your mind for your writing for this week. So in this sentence, please can you identify which is the relative clause and can you explain why? As you can see, I've highlighted now the part that is the relative clause, which is all in yellow. It's everything between the commas. So the actual relative clause is which celebrates the unification of the living and the dead. So this is a relative clause because it begins with the relative pronoun which. So which there is what we would call a relative pronoun. And it can be, the whole clause can be removed from the sentence and it still makes sense. It's just extra information, and it's extra information all about the festival. So if I took that out, I would still have a sentence which is, "The festival takes place in Mexico." That fully makes sense by itself. But to show that I can write more complex sentences with extra clauses in, I've done it this way. So my sentence reads, "The festival which celebrates the unification of the living and the dead takes place in Mexico," just to show that I am capable of writing more complex sentences. Have a go at identifying the relative clause in this sentence now on your own. So here you can see that there is actually a relative clause on the end of the sentence. So when you do one on the end of the sentence, it only needs one piece of punctuation at the start of it. So rather than having a pair of commas, we've just got the one after relatives. If this was with dashes, I would do the same and just have one dash. You'll notice there's no dashes on the end, so we need to make sure that if we do a relative clause at the end of a sentence, that we just use one part of the punctuation and we don't use them in pairs. So here, the land of the dead is believed to be home to lost relatives who have passed away. If I took that "who have passed away" clause off the end, the sentence would still make sense. The land of the dead is believed to be home to lost relatives. So again, it is still just extra information, and in the case of this sentence, "who have passed away" is extra information about the relatives. When we are writing, it's really important that we think about different ways to write and what we're focusing on within a sentence. So when we look at these symbols, who can remember what these are? Okay, great, that is right, they are the fantastics, and each one stands for a different thing that you're focusing on in the sentence. For example, the image of the nose is where you would describe all the scents that perhaps a character could smell, but you could use this in a non-chronological report if you were describing perhaps a cooking show or a recipe and the sense that would be coming from the food. The hand is how something feels and the touch of it. So that's the touching kind of sentences. And that would be describing perhaps how maybe clothes felt, a character was, or if a character fell over, how if they hit the ground, what the ground felt like beneath them. The little legs are the action sentence, so that describes how something moves or an event that's taking place. And that one will be particularly useful in our writing this week because we've got lots of different events going on. So, can you spot any fantastic sentences in here? So, the Day of the Dead Festival is a celebration of life and is filled with vibrant colours. During the event, people decorate their homes, streets, and gravestones with elaborate skulls. That's right, there are noticing sentences in here. And there are also action sentences. So an action would be that people are decorating their homes, and the noticing part is that they use elaborate skulls and the information about the vibrant colours. There could be more description there, but both of those are fantastics. So I've gone through and I've picked out the fantastics that I think will work for our writing this week. So we've got the eyes, the yellow eyes, which is the noticing sentence, so describing what we would see. Really important this week because we need our reader to be able to visualise what we're telling them about this special festival. Again, the green action legs, those ones are great because they can tell us about the events that are taking place, perhaps the dancing, the singing that people do. We've got the heart, which is the feeling sentence. How is the Day of the Dead Festival meant to make people feel? How do they react to it? I personally think it is a celebration, so it's quite joyful. People enjoy the celebration. It's not a time for crying, although people can be emotional. It is more of a happy celebration. And then the last one, the purple ear, there we've got the sound sentences. So that's where I'd be thinking that you'll be describing people singing, the noise on the streets because it's so packed, the bustling crowds chattering away. Those are the kinds of things that you'll be trying to get into your writing. So this is an example of what your planning sheet will look like. So that's the example there for you. Now we've used these before. They're usually a narrative map, but we're going to use them for a non-fiction piece of writing. So the boxes in between the arrows are what will make up your subheadings. So I've already put on mine. My first box is the introduction, and I give a bit of detail about what will go in there. The next one is the spirit of the children, because that's a really important part of the festival. Then the next day is the spirit of the adults, so I include that as my next subheading. And then I've got the spirit of the all dead. I would also have a glossary section as well, but you could keep that two-lined paper. And then I put on the symbols just to remind you of which sentence types you're going to be focusing on. And the boxes above give a little bit of a prompt for what you need to add. So there is this example and then a blank template for you to fill in yourself. So refer back to this if you need any help with your planning today. You will also be using your research sheet as that's where your facts will come from. So I thought I'd just show you a quick WAGOLL of a plan. So I've just chosen just to focus in on the subheading, the spirit of the children. You could call this day one of the festival because this is when it begins. So I've just bullet pointed what I know I'm going to include, and then I've made a reference to the grammar that I know I need to include in order for me to get and hit my success criteria. So I put my subheading, you will already have that on your plan, and then I would be writing this onto my planning sheet. So I've got it happens at midnight, the 1st of November, and then in brackets I've got last 24 hours. I've put that there because actually I'm going to be using that as parenthesis and I'm going to have a relative clause there. I haven't written my relative clause, but I put it in brackets to remind me I'm probably going to use that as a bit of extra information. Then I've put another bullet point also called Dia de los Angelitos, and then again in brackets I put Day of Little Angels. So there I know again I've got some extra information that I need to add in, and I will probably try and show that in dashes just to vary my punctuation. I then have put down that reunites the deceased children. That's important because that is what the spirit of the children is. So I need to make sure that I'm telling my reader what is actually happening there. I've put it's a celebration of life. I want to really get across that this is a joyful celebration, not something that people should feel really sad about. I've put that things are placed on ofrendas and then in brackets altars. I've put ofrendas and highlighted it yellow because that's one of the words that I'm going to put in my glossary because I know my reader probably won't know what that is. I've put it's a special day because I want to again reinforce that idea that this is a really special celebration for people. And then I've put the grammar that I know I want to include in this, and I've put brackets and I've put a DD sentence. So I want to try and develop a DD sentence with a colon in my writing there. So it's just me being very mindful when I'm planning. I'm going to use this plan, so when I write, I'm going to tick off each of these once I've included it, and I'll tick off my grammar once I've done that as well. And hopefully these will be the building blocks that will mean I will write a really successful piece of writing for Year 6. Now you've finished your plan, I would like you to complete a cup check on your writing, so you're checking for your capital letters, your understanding, your punctuation and your spellings. Do not submit it if you have missed capital letters, full stops, or made really silly spelling errors and not use your own words. Again, I'll reiterate, we are expecting a high quality of work, so you need to take your time, don't rush, and send in a good piece of work that you'll be happy to give us in class as well. And when you are happy and you think you've done all of those, submit your work to us. Hope you've enjoyed this lesson. Really looking forward to reading all of your plans.